Chapter 13 of Best Russian Short Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Best Russian Short Stories, edited and compiled by Thomas Seltzer. The Bet by Anton Chekhov. 1. It was a dark autumn night. The old banker was pacing from corner to corner of his study, recalling to his mind the party he gave in the autumn 15 years before. There were many clever people at the party, and much interesting conversation. They talked, among other things, of capital punishment. The guests, among them not a few scholars and journalists, for the most part disapproved of capital punishment. They found it obsolete as a means of punishment, unfitted to a Christian state, and immoral. Some of them thought that capital punishment should be replaced universally by life imprisonment. "I don't agree with you," said the host. "I myself have experienced neither capital punishment nor life imprisonment. But if one may judge a priori, then in my opinion capital punishment is more moral and more humane than imprisonment. Execution kills instantly. Life imprisonment kills by degrees. Who is the more humane executioner, one who kills you in a few seconds, or one who draws the life out of you incessantly for years?" "They're both equally important," remarked one of the guests, "because their purpose is the same, to take away life. The state is not God. It has no right to take away that which it cannot give back, if it should so desire." Among the company was a lawyer, a young man of about 25. On being asked his opinion, he said, "Capital punishment and life imprisonment are equally immoral, but if I were offered the choice between them, I would certainly choose the second. It's better to live somehow than not to live at all." There ensued a lively discussion. The banker, who was then younger and more nervous, suddenly lost his temper, banging his fist on the table, and turning to the young lawyer, cried out, "That's a lie! I bet you 2 million you wouldn't stick in a cell, even for 5 years." "If you mean it seriously," replied the lawyer, "then I bet I'll stay not 5, but 15. 15? Done!" cried the banker. "Gentlemen, I stake 2 millions. "Agreed. You stake 2 millions, I my freedom," said the lawyer. So this wild, ridiculous bet came to pass. The banker, who at that time had too many millions to count, spoiled and capricious, was beside himself with rapture. During supper he said to the lawyer jokingly, "Come to your senses, young man, before it's too late. 2 millions is nothing to me. But you stand to lose 3 or 4 of the best years of your life. I say 3 or 4 because you'll never stick it out any longer. Don't forget either, you unhappy man, that voluntary is much heavier than enforced imprisonment. The idea that you have the right to free yourself at any moment will poison the whole of your life in the cell. I pity you." And now the banker, pacing from corner to corner, recalled all this, and asked himself, "Why did I make this bet? What's the good? The lawyer loses 15 years of his life, and I throw away 2 millions. Will it convince people that capital punishment is worse or better than imprisonment for life? No. All stuff and rubbish. On my part it was the caprice of a well-fed man. On the lawyer's, pure greed of gold." He recollected further what happened after the evening party. It was decided that the lawyer must undergo his imprisonment, under the strictest observation, in a garden wing of the banker's house. It was agreed that during the period he would be deprived of the right to cross the threshold, to see living people, to hear human voices, and to receive letters and newspapers. He was permitted to have a musical instrument, to read books, to write letters, to drink wine and smoke tobacco. By agreement he could communicate, but only in silence, with the outside world, through a little window specially constructed for this purpose. Everything necessary, books, music, wine, he could receive in any quantity by sending a note through the window. The agreement provided for all the minutest details, which made the confinement strictly solitary, and it obliged the lawyer to remain exactly 15 years, from 12 o'clock of November 14, 1870, to 12 o'clock of November 14, 1885. The least attempt on his part to violate the conditions, to escape if only for 2 minutes before the time, freed the banker from the obligation to pay him the 2 millions. During the first year of imprisonment, the lawyer, as far as it was possible to judge from his short notes, suffered terrible loneliness and boredom. From his wing, day and night came the sound of the piano. He rejected wine and tobacco. Wine, he wrote, excites desires, and desires are the chief foes of a prisoner. Besides, nothing is more boring than to drink good wine alone, and tobacco spoils the air in his room. During the first year, the lawyer was sent books of a light character, novels with a complicated love interest, stories of crime and fantasy, comedies, and so on. In the second year the piano was heard no longer, and the lawyer asked only for the classics. In the fifth year music was heard again, and the prisoner asked for wine. Those that watched him said that during the whole of that year he was only eating, drinking, and lying on his bed. He yawned often and talked angrily to himself. Books he did not read. Sometimes at nights he would sit down to write. He would write for a long time and tear it all up in the morning. More than once he was heard to weep. In the second half of the sixth year, the prisoner began zealously to study languages, philosophy, and history. He fell on these subjects so hungrily that the banker hardly had time to get books enough for him. In the space of 4 years, about 600 volumes were bought at his request. It was while that passion lasted that the banker received the following letter from the prisoner. My dear jailer, I am writing these letters in 6 languages. Show them to experts. Let them read them. If they do not find one single mistake, I beg you to give orders to have a gun fired off in the garden. By the noise I shall know that my efforts have not been in vain. The geniuses of all ages and countries speak in different languages, but in them all burns the same flame. Oh, if you knew my heavenly happiness, now that I can understand them! The prisoner's desire was fulfilled. 2 shots were fired in the garden by the banker's orders. Later on, after the 10th year, the lawyer sat immobile before his table and read only the New Testament. The banker found it strange that a man who, in 4 years, had mastered 600 erudite volumes, should have spent nearly a year in reading one book, easy to understand and by no means thick. The New Testament was then replaced by the history of religions and theology. During the last 2 years of his confinement, the prisoner read an extraordinary amount, quite haphazardly. Now he would apply himself to the natural sciences, then he would read Byron or Shakespeare. Notes used to come from him, which he asked to be sent at the same time, a book on chemistry, a textbook of medicine, a novel, and some treatise on philosophy or theology. He read as though he were swimming in a sea among broken pieces of wreckage, and in his desire to save his life was eagerly grasping at one piece or another. 2. The banker recalled all this, and thought, Tomorrow at 12 o'clock he receives his freedom. Under the agreement I shall have to pay him 2 millions. If I pay, it's all over for me. I am ruined forever. 15 years before he had too many millions to count, and now he was afraid to ask himself which he had more of, money or debts. Gambling on the stock exchange, risky speculation, and the recklessness of which he could not rid himself even in